Fungus is the main villain as HBO Max brings video game The Last of Us to the television. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is the Fandom Realm. And today I am recapping and reviewing The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 1 on HBO Max. This is one of the most anticipated TV shows of the year for many people. It's expected to be one of the best ever video adaptations or big screen adaptations of a video game, and the early reviews that are in are very good. So I'm very excited to see what is up with The Last of Us. Of course, it does star Pedro Pascal, also known as the Mandalorian, and so I'm just very excited to see where this is going to go. Haven't historically been into big zombie movies, and I've never played The Last of Us games, so I'm not real familiar with where things are going, and so we're going to see how all that plays out. With that being said, this is a spoiler review, so just be warned. This episode is going to start out in 1968, and we're going to get to see a talk show, and there are two epidemiologists that are discussing the possibilities of a pandemic, and they are discussing what's going to be the most likely thing to cause a pandemic. And one of the doctors, his name is Dr. Newman, is way more concerned about fungal infections than he is viral infections, which is what the other doctor was really concerned about. Seems far-fetched, but he actually explains that fungus can alter your minds, they devour the host from within, and they can prevent you from decomposing. All that sounds like potential zombies to me. Dr. Newman also is pointing out that if the world got any warmer, that fungi could evolve to affect humans, and it could take control of billions, and that could basically wipe out the entire human population with no cure and no possible way to make a cure. And as he says, if this happens, we lose. Now, in the next part of the episode, we're going to be introduced to several of our bigger characters. Of course, we're going to get Joel and Sarah. We're also going to get Tommy. And basically what happens here is we are fast forwarding from 1968 to 2003. And we meet Sarah, who is Joel's daughter. And Joel is just getting out of bed. Sarah's fixing him breakfast. It's his birthday. And the brothers, Joel and Tommy, work in construction, and despite it being his 36th birthday, Joel has to go to work and work a double, but he does promise Sarah he'll be home by 9 and bring a cake. Now, while they're discussing all this, we do hear on their radio that there are some vague reports of disturbances in Jakarta. Now, while that means we're going to get to see Sarah heads into her dad's bedroom and takes a broken watch out, and she gets a few dollars. With that, she's also looking over his pocket knife. On the way out the door, as the trio is leaving, they show us the neighbors who Sarah is going to visit after school. And as they drive away, we also get to learn that they are actually located in Austin, Texas, and Tommy is a Desert Storm veteran. After school, we learn why Sarah was getting the watch. She takes it to a jewelry store to get it repaired. It's going to be a gift for her dad. But something's going on because the owner of the store, his wife, is going to come up and they're going to close the store real quickly, and the repairman is able to fix the watch, and Sarah's going to head out to the neighbor's house. While there, we get to see in the background as Sarah's wheelchair-bound neighbor begins to twitch oddly. Her mouth opens, almost like she's trying to talk or scream, and that's something that Sarah doesn't actually get to see. She has left and turned her back at that point in time. She's also going to notice that something's going on with the neighbor's dog. Dog is not happy at all. We also get to see several fighter jets fly overhead, and there are a lot more police on the road, and all this concerns Sarah. Finally, Joel's going to come home. It's later than expected. Of course, he forgot the cake. He swears he's going to get one tomorrow, and Sarah's going to give him his birthday present. And of course, she tells him she did take money from him to fix the watch, and Joel is very appreciative. Later that night, Joel's going to get a call from Tommy. Tommy's in jail and needs to get bailed out. So after Sarah heads to bed, Joel heads out to help his brother. Now, moving on into the next section, if this happens, we lose. Basically, 3 hours later, Sarah wakes up and she's alone. Bombs are going off, car alarms are sounding, chaos is out there. And the house is empty, and there's emergency broadcasts saying that people should stay indoors. But the neighbor's dog is making noise and knocking on their door. And so Sarah gets up to investigate, and she decides to go over and take the dog back over to the neighbors, but the dog isn't having anything of that and runs off. She goes to check on the neighbors, and as she goes in, or she heard a gunshot, she hears, and she goes in and finds a blood trail. She's going to find one of her neighbors is bleeding out on the floor, and she's going to find another neighbor on the floor basically being eaten by the old woman who was in the wheelchair. Sarah's going to run outside, and the old woman runs after her, and the old woman's going to be taken out by Joel. They jump in the car, and they're going to want to leave, and as they do, we find out that from Tommy that everything on the TV and radio is mentioning that this is some type of virus. Cell phones and radios are down, but most of the infection has happened in the big cities, and so they are probably okay. They're going to be on the highway, and there's a family broken down. They passed it by, although they did have a child, because Joel said, we have a child too. Of course, that was Sarah. And they're going to come to the freeway, which is packed with cars, and they're going to have to go through the grass to get around, and they're going to find an area blocked off by the army. They decide to go another way through town, but as they do, they see several airplanes flying very low, and one of the airplanes is going to crash onto the street, and it's going to knock their car upside down. Now, moving on, Joel and Tommy are fine after the car wreck, but Sarah has hurt her ankle, and they're all going to get blocked off from one another, especially Joel and Sarah from Tommy, but Tommy says he'll meet them at the river. Joel picks Sarah up, and they head down the streets, and they're going to be running through a diner from an infected person, and right before the person grabbed them, a SWAT officer is going to shoot the infected man and going to hold a gun on Joel and Sarah. Joel tries to explain to the SWAT officer that Sarah has an injured ankle, and the SWAT commander radios back to the commander, and it's obvious that the SWAT guy has orders to take Joel and Sarah out. Joel's going to be pleading with the officer that they're not sick, but as the officer opens fire, they're going to fall down a hill. As the officer follows, saying, "I'm sorry," before he can finish them off, the SWAT member gets shot by Tommy. Joel and Tommy are going to obviously be okay, but they're going to hear Sarah crying off in the distance, and they find her covered in blood. She got shot in the stomach. Joel desperately wants to get Sarah out of there, but it is obvious that she has died. Joel's going to be extremely upset. He's covered in her blood, and he keeps saying, "Come on, baby girl," as he's holding Sarah. And so now Joel has lost the most important thing he had, his daughter. The episode is going to cut to black at this point. Now our story moves 20 years in the future. So this is approximately 2023. And we're going to see that we have moved on to Boston. And Boston, we're in the quarantine zone, and a child has stumbled into the zone, and before he gets through the gates, he passes out. The kid is brought inside and questioned, and they're testing to see if he's infected. One of the guards tells him that they're going to give him his favorite food and some new clothes, and he's given a shot and told he was safe. We're going to see more of the Boston quarantine zone, and the big thing here is a lot of dead bodies. They're being burned in the streets, basically by the truckload, and we're actually going to see that one of those bodies is the child that we were just introduced to. One of the workers who was responsible for burning the bodies couldn't do it to put the body of the child in the fire, so we see Joel is there, and he is going to put the kid's body into the fire to burn it. We get to see that Joel is basically a smuggler. He is working in the quarantine zone, but he's smuggling ration cards in exchange for pills. He's trying to find a car. He's trying to get out of Boston. And we're also going to be introduced to a Fedra soldier. We're also going to be introduced to the Fireflies, who are a resistance group, who the Fedra soldier mentions. And a quote that's on the building that I love is, "When you're lost in the darkness, look for the light." And so I think that's going to be a theme of this entire series. We're then going to meet Tess, who's being held by a man named Robert. He ripped her off. She was purchasing a truck battery, and he had already sold the battery to someone else. So he's going to capture her and beat her. And with everything going on, a bomb goes off and she escapes, but she escapes right in the middle of a fight between Fedra and the Fireflies, and she ends up being taken into custody by a Fedra officer. Now, in the next section, we are going to get introduced to Ellie and the Fireflies. Now, we're going to be introduced to Ellie first off, where she is being held captive. She's being chained up and tested by a woman named Victoria, and she's being given several tests, one of which was to count from 1 to 10, and we can see that Ellie's got a little bit of an attitude because she ends the counting with an FU and a middle finger. As Veronica leaves, we get to see the Firefly logo on the door, and we get to see another piece of graffiti, and this time it only says, "When you are lost in the darkness." Moving back to Joel. Joel is visiting a man with a huge radio set up, and the man tells Joel that he hasn't heard from Tommy in 3 weeks, although it usually only takes him a day to respond. Joel learns that the other tower is in Wyoming, and we see Joel head back to his apartment where he's going to drink a bunch of booze and take the pills. We also see that he has the watch that Sarah had gotten repaired for him. He still has it on, but it appears to be broken again. Joel's going to pass out in bed, and he's going to wake up when he hears Tess come in. Apparently they are together, and she gets into bed with him. The next morning, Tess explains what had happened with the battery, that Robert had sold it to someone else, and they're going to agree that they have to hunt down Robert and get off. They're going to need to go find Tommy. We're going to go back to Fireflies, and we're going to be introduced to Marlene, the leader of the Boston Fireflies, and she's being questioned about why they are attacking Fedra soldiers and why she still has Ellie tied up. And Marlene actually reveals that they're attacking the Fedra soldiers to get them paying attention everywhere except their hideout. They need to get out of the quarantine zone and take the girl out west. And Marlene is going to give the other Firefly a note that explains what they're doing. The other Firefly seems stunned and asks if it is real, and Marlene says that she believes it is, and they agree to get the girl wherever she needs to go. Now, moving on, we are making plans to leave Boston, and Joel is guarding Tess while they're meeting, and a man comes up and asks Joel if he's feeling lost, and Joel tells him, "If you tell me to look for the light, I'll break your fucking jaw." And that's meant to show that Fireflies basically are trying to be positive. Joel is not so much, and he's not in a very good mood. Tess finds out where Robert is hiding, and her and Joel are going to head out to pay him back. We move back to Ellie, and Marlene comes in to visit her. She gives her backpack, and she basically tells her that they are going to be leaving, in which they also have a discussion about the fact that Ellie had been put into an orphanage. She apparently thought it was by Fedra, but apparently it was Marlene who had put Ellie into the orphanage as a baby, and that Marlene knows her actual real name. As they're discussing what's going on, Ellie asks why she can't go home, and Marlene tells her that she has a greater purpose than any of them could have imagined, and that they are leaving tonight and taking Ellie with them. Meanwhile, Joel and Tess are searching for Robert. They enter into to the subway, and they're going to find a decomposed body of a man who has apparently died from the fungal infection. They're going to make their way up a ladder. They smell gunpowder and see blood seeping under the door. The door itself is actually blocked by Robert's dead body. Next to it is the battery that they were after. As they come into the hallway, there has clearly been a shootout. Other people are dead, and Joel and Tess hear Marlene and Kim at the end of the hall, and Ellie comes out of the door to attack Joel, who successfully fends her off. It turns out that Robert was trying to sell the battery also to Marlene and the Fireflies, and the deal went bad. Kim is without an ear, Marlene's shot in the side, and she tells Joel they need the battery more than Joel does. It's obvious that these people know each other, and Joel is upset with Marlene because apparently he feels that she turned Tommy against him. Marlene informs Joel of her plan to get Ellie out of the quarantine zone and wants to get Joel's help to do so. But she does know that Tess and Joel aren't people smugglers. But now Marlene doesn't have anyone to help Ellie. She's lost Fireflies, and she knows Joel and Tess are very capable. So in the end, they agree to get Ellie to the old state house to meet the Fireflies, and then they should have everything they need, truck, guns, supplies, whatever, and it's going to be agreed between Tess and Joel that they transport Ellie to get to the Fireflies. And if they don't get what they need, they'll kill Ellie. Now, moving on to wrap up this episode, Joel and Tess take Ellie to a hideout, and they are talking about two people named Bill and Frank. Ellie is going to find a radio and a code inside, and there's a list of Billboard chart songs, and the list actually reads 60, nothing in, 70, new stock, 80 has an X beside it. When Joel comes back inside, Ellie asks about Bill and Frank and about the code, and Joel basically ignores her and takes a nap. Ellie also mentions to Joel about the watch. She notices that it's broken, and of course Joel does take his nap. When he wakes up, Ellie tells him that she's never been outside of the quarantine zone wall, and then she asks Joel if they're going to be okay once they get to the other side, and Joel says they will. Joel is curious about Ellie because he's wondering if maybe she's some bigwig's daughter, and Ellie says it's something like that. Actually, while Joel was asleep, the radio came on and played a song that went, "Wake me up before you go, go." Joel responds, "Shit," to which Ellie says, "Gotcha." 80s means trouble. Code broken. And soon after, Tess returns and they head out. The trio are going to get outside of the quarantine zone. They were able to get by the Fedra soldiers, but they do run into that guard that Joel had sold pills to earlier. The soldier puts them on their knees and he's testing them to see if they're infected. We do get to see that Tess and Joel are clean, but Ellie's going to stab the soldier before he can get a read on her status. Joel starts to have a flashback to back when he lost Sarah. He's starting to get some fatherly instincts to protect Ellie, and before the guard is able to do anything to Ellie, Joel tackles him and punches him until he kills him. Tess is going to realize that Ellie's test ended up being positive, and when questioned, Ellie replies that she is not infected, that she was bitten, but that was 3 weeks ago, and nothing has happened. Even though they're very wary of Ellie's claims, they have to get away from Fedra. As they continue outside of the quarantine zone, we cut back to the radio, which comes on and plays Never Let Me Down again from 1987, and as the song plays, we see the nightmare that the trio are getting ready to face on their journey ahead. And this episode comes to an end. All right, everyone, now that we have finished the recap, I do want to go back and throw out there just some thoughts and some reactions. And while I'm doing this, do remember that I have never played the Last of Us games. I haven't even seen the previews, the trailers for this series. So I was trying to stay as fresh to it as possible. So everything that's happening, I am new to. So keep that in mind if I mess something up. But first off, I just want to throw out there there. I thought it was very interesting that we go all the way back to the 60s for these scientists to be talking about viral infections and pandemics and what could happen in the future, and that it could be linked to something like global warming. And of course, we know today we do have some of those issues, especially with global warming. And of course, by the time the show moves on, we skip to 2003 and then another 20 years afterwards to present day time period. And so I thought that was very interesting how they introduced us to what could be the pandemic. And then of course with that, once we get into the story and they start basically allowing us to hear information like what was going on in Jakarta and bombs dropping and guns going off and all those type of things happening. And we know because of that opening that bad things are getting ready to happen. Now, just the second thing, just Sarah's death. I'll be honest, I was shocked. I was not expecting this. I knew Sarah was not Ellie. I didn't know enough to figure that out. And it was shocking that they killed her. Those guards apparently just didn't care that they weren't infected. They just assumed they were potentially infected and opened fire on command. And, it's hard to watch that. And you see Sarah, who just in that short amount of time, we really started to like to see her get killed. It's sort of heartbreaking. But the other heartbreaking thing is just knowing that things in society are so bad and this potential illness is so bad that your own police and your own army are opening up and firing and killing their own citizens to try to stop the spread of this. This is what makes a pandemic, I think, so scary, is what will the government do to stop it. Now, of course, I also loved the characters. I thought we got just enough of them to get us into the show. I don't want to know everything about them to start with. Of course, we get a lot about Joel, main character, and we had to have him losing Sarah early on. That, of course, is going to give him more feelings for Ellie as we go through. The other characters, we just don't know a lot about them. I'm expecting a lot more information on them as we go. Of course, it seems like Ellie possibly could be a cure or something that could help get rid of this fungus if she has been bitten and has not had any changes. I'm going to be interested to see how that turns out. So I thought that was very important. And I'm going to tell you, I loved Bella Ramsey here. I thought she was cast perfectly, and just she still has that whole FU type attitude that she had in Game of Thrones as well. And I love that about her. Now, I'll also talk about world building. Thought they did a very good job of building the world. This is something new to people, so this is not going to be done in just one episode. But I thought they did a pretty good job of introducing the virus and introducing our characters and the type of society we're living in. And they did a very good job of starting that. The time jumps, I thought, were very effective, how they did that. And the fact that we're basically playing in the game, and it is now, it is the same date as we are in right now, and that's 2023. And that'll make you think every now and then about what's going on. And then there was one point in the episode, I think it's when they were driving, trying to get out of the city, that somebody, I think, was being a side seat driver, maybe Tommy, and the way he was talking and the way they had it all filmed and everything, it made it seem like you were watching a video game happening at the time, or at least that's what I thought of. Now, last positive thing or last general thing to talk about here is I think the writing has been outstanding overall so far. I don't think there were any hiccups here. I think they have done a very good job of bringing this video game to television, and I hope it's going to continue. The pacing, extremely good. Love the pacing. Everything with the characters, just very well done. And this is one of those things, and somebody's going to get mad at me, I know, but all I hear when we talk about the series Andor was how great the writing was and how great it was, the greatest Star Wars thing ever. Problem with that is when I look at Andor and the writing, and I look at Star Wars, when I look at Andor's writing and I look at The Last of Us writing, The Last of Us is on a whole different level above Andor, in my opinion. And it just moves faster. It's interesting. We met more characters. They interacted more. We had action to start with. And that's things that I didn't see in Andor. So this series is exciting me, although I'm a huge huge Star Wars fan, and I should have loved Andor more. I really enjoyed this first episode. Now, I am going to just throw one little negative in there right now, and that is, boy, this series feels an awful like The Walking Dead, and I really hope it doesn't turn into that. We've already seen The Walking Dead. We've seen a lot of seasons of The Walking Dead, and I hope it does some things to distinguish itself from The Walking Dead, because, you know, while we were doing this, while we were watching this episode, every so often I thought, this is very similar to The Walking Dead. Do I want to watch a series that is just basically a remake of The Walking Dead? But that's very small right now. We're going to see how that goes. Maybe it doesn't turn out being The Walking Dead at all, and I hope it doesn't. But that's just, if I had anything to pick at or nitpick, it's going to be that sort of Walking Dead feeling that I've got from the series so far. That may change as we move on. Now, with that, I do want to give a quick grade. Of course, I just gave you a bunch of things I liked and one little thing that I didn't. So I'm going to give this first episode of The Last of Us a grade of a A-. I really enjoyed this. I think we're off to a great start, and I am looking forward to see where we go in the future. Now, with that, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this recap and review. Please hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment below to help us out. And I'm going to see you next time on the Fandom Realm.